Season 2 of the Pat and JT podcast.
Oh man, I'm here at last. The best time, always gonna be the best. Come on!
Openly soliciting you to slide into our DMs. It's Pat and JT, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
It's not that sexy.
Yeah, it's really not. 402-403-9478. You can text us, email, hey@patandjt.com.
I just want to say thank you to all the butter eaters that are out there.
That is the
Just gonna
weirdest
throw that out
sentence
there
I've
real
ever-
quick.
You're not alone.
I'm not alone.
Congratulations.
So
Is that a list you want to like? I'm on the butter eaters, butter eaters, not lovers, butter eaters.
oh,
Club.
I love it too.
Well, yeah. Well, you wouldn't be an eater if you didn't love it.
Don't say that too slow, by the way.
What butter? Wow, that's a very good point. Thank you. I will.
So we'll just drop that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we gotta make sure we edit the transcript before we just throw that boy out.
Not even touching that.
Oh my gosh. So Dan, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. We're gonna have to pull that a little bit closer to you.
Yes,
I know you're good with film. I know that.
Yeah.
We got to get you on audio. It's kind of hard to capture it.
We're working on it. We'll get better. We'll get better every week.
We'll get there.
And Sasha, and then you brought a friend. Dan did.
Yeah, absolutely. Archie Montemayor, a professional paintball player extraordinaire with San Antonio X Factor.
Which I didn't even realize that was an actual thing until about 6 weeks ago. Talking to you, I didn't realize
Yeah.
you could be a professional paintball player.
Did you know Omaha had a team?
I had no idea.
Omaha Vicious is what they were called.
Really?
I've done a little research. I was looking into it, right?
JT bringing the
Right?
Right.
I was like looking
Dropping
at the
the
list
knowledge.
because I was like, how many teams are out there? I mean, how can we not? There must be like 6, 8, No,
Yeah.
it's worldwide.
Yeah.
Archie, welcome to the podcast too.
Yes, great to be on.
So the team you're on is San Antonio, right?
Yeah, San Antonio X Factor.
Okay. And so in the United States, or in North America, I know there's like 20, 25 teams currently. That's crazy. I had
Yeah.
no idea.
I mean, it is. I think was that JT saying he didn't know that was even a thing, which is
No, that was
pretty much.
Pat. It's Pat. Pat's the boy. I didn't have a girl name, but
Oh, okay. My
it's okay. That's why my Twitter handle is
Well-
it's Pat. Pat is a boy.
That literally is his Twitter handle.
Yeah.
Pat's a boy.
Lovely. Well, yeah. So that's pretty much everybody's response to professional paintball. That's a thing. I had no idea. But I mean, I would say it's like a really niche sport, and for those that are really into it, it's pretty profound and definitely exciting, and kind of a cool way to live your life, I guess.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's something that's been, the game itself kind of dates back to the early 80s, like the pro scene or pro circuit got established in the late 80s, early 90s. So it's really been, it's really been going in one form for almost 3 decades. And so there's been guys, and it's been, it's had its
ebb and
time.
flow?
It's had its time periods
Yeah.
where it's been positioned as like the next quote unquote. And people have thought, oh, this is the next action sport or extreme sport that's gonna like break out.
Right.
And for whatever reason,
Yeah.
it's kind of gone back and forth.
I've played a couple times. First takeaway hurts.
That was one of my questions about what was the.
Just welty.
I was looking at like some of the equipment you guys wear because they're saying that it really hurts if it hits your hands or your knuckles.
Or your neck.
Or your neck. But you're supposed to wear like a helmet.
Yeah, but that doesn't cover your neck. I get pelted right on the Adam's apple.
Doesn't it? I don't know.
No, it's
I
always-
think the new ones do. I think. How old were you when you did this?
Oh, I was 30.
Okay.
I mean, so 16 years ago. But I think, and we're talking about too the Best Kids in Texas, which is a documentary by Hurrdat Films, and you, Dan, created this documentary, which is awesome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and I noticed that in competition they didn't have neck helmets. It was exposed
I think it's called a neck guard.
or whatever.
We'll go with that. Archie, you want to jump in here?
I'm still kind of laughing at the neck helmet. Yeah, I mean, he is right. Paintballs can hurt. There's definitely some soft spots and places you don't want to get hit. But that's the beauty of getting kind of better, is that hopefully you don't get hit that much.
Oh, there you go. That's a point, huh, Pat?
That is true.
So those
Maybe
that
don't
got
suck
hit,
at it.
Don't suck. You won't get hurt. Get welty.
Get welty. Get sucky, get welty. Now, okay, how long have you been playing, Archie?
It's I think 21 or 22 years.
Oh, geez.
I started just before the year 2000, but I mean, I was a kid. I was 16, or maybe, yeah, no, sorry. I was like 14 now that I think about it. And it was a friend's birthday party, which is very common. And I mean, the first game I played, I was just instantly hooked. It was definitely the funnest thing I'd done up until that point. And then, you know, when you get a little more involved, and then certainly when you start traveling to play, the people you meet, the places you go, it's a really just incredible journey if you can put the time and dedication into it. So
Have you always
it's
been with
definitely
the same-
been.
I was gonna say, have you always been
sorry?
with the same team, or have you skipped around a little bit?
As far as pro teams go, I've played with 2 teams, and that's San Antonio X Factor, which is kind of like my homegrown team, a team of all friends. I've known some of the guys for the entirety of the time I've been playing paintball, so over 20 years. And then I also, at one point or another, I played with what's considered the best team of all time for a couple of years, and that's San Diego Dynasty.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about that just a little bit. How'd that come to be?
Yeah. Well, so basically, I mean, when we were growing, I mean, again, they were the best team ever. So a lot of players younger than they are pretty much looked up to them for their entire careers, including most of the guys on the team. And Dan makes a really good or an interesting contrast between X Factor and Dynasty in that they were our heroes when we were younger. And our careers ended up being somewhat similar. We have some similarities, but, you know, at one point, our team was kind of on a downtrend, and I just decided to go play with them. So I played with them for a couple of years, and then decided to come back and kind of started our journey again, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Dan, how did you come up with this idea for this documentary?
Well, so I've known these guys since they were kids. I've worked in action sports for a long time, and again, like Archie was kind of mentioning, how it is very similar to. It shares a lot of DNA with a lot of those other action sports, where you know, snow, surf, skate. They're their own thing. They're their own scene. There's lifestyle and there's stuff that goes with that. And so I had worked for a long time. Doing brand films for and brand videos inside of paintball, because again, and this is a model established in, you know, probably the 70s by Warren Miller and in the 80s by Stacy Peralta and Bones Brigade, where
Who are those people? I'm sorry.
So Warren Miller is that's a very good name check. So Warren Miller is a very famous, both of them are famous action sports documentary. Warren Miller is kind of the apex of documentaries in ski.
Okay.
And Stacy Peralta is a former pro skater and kind of revolutionized, easy for me to say.
We'll wait.
Yeah, thank you. You might take a minute,
Work
Joe.
through it.
I had like a 13-hour shoot yesterday, man. I'm a little foggy. But was a revolutionary in skate video production. He directed the documentary Dogtown, but he really started in the 80s. He realized the power of video and the power of what was coming to be home video, VHS, and so kind of really started this trend where if you're a skate brand, you have sponsored athletes, you have sponsored riders. It only makes sense, like, you go film them, you film their lifestyle, you go film them doing tricks, and you put out a new video every year. So that kind of translates to a lot of those other sports, was kind of starting to translate into paintball. We worked with an awesome brand called Planet Eclipse, and they're a sponsor of Archie and X Factor. And so that's how it kind of started. And then, you know, so as a filmmaker, I mean, since their pro debut in 2006, on and off, I spent a ton of time with these guys. Had been overseas with them in France sometimes, or the UK. And so the thing that started to get really special about Arch and the X Factor story is, and I'd be interested in Archie's take on this once I wrap it up, which I will, I promise. But like most pro paintball teams, and that's why it's kind of cool and interesting and shares so much DNA with things like bands and music, and because it's totally decentralized, right? So what that means is, like, there's the league, and you see it in the film, the standard pro league, the establishment, like, that changes constantly. So there's very there's not this lineage that like, okay, we are the NFL, there's 28 teams, we will all vote if we expand. It doesn't really work like that. So pro paintball teams tend to go like bands. You have these 3, 4, 5-year runs, Dynasty being a huge exception. So if you look over time, so even like you're referencing like Omaha Vicious. Omaha Vicious was an amateur team that climbed up, finally started to make a little bit of waves in the pro scene when they kind of potted it down. I think they played 4 pro seasons.
Wow.
And that 3 to 4, 5 years kind of tends to be the lifespan, another team that had a Nebraska tie, Avalanche, was like the precursors to the team Archie was talking about, Dynasty, and they were rock stars for like 5 years. What gets interesting with X Factor's story really is the kind of comeback. They never... they've been 13 seasons, I think, pro now, and as they started to get reestablished, that what started to be really interesting and really different about them is how many of their original players stuck around, how many of them started to come back, and how they established themselves in their community and put them and the paintball scene where they lived on the map. And again, that was a difference with Dynasty that Archie was referencing. Dynasty's from California. And we all know anything action sports, California is the heyday. Like these guys stamped out a place that wasn't like on the map. So as a filmmaker, those are the elements that start to be like, okay, there's maybe a really bigger story here that's maybe open to, more audiences than just the hardcore paintball audience. So Arch, I'm sorry, dude. I was trying to set you up of like, would you say 3 to 5 years is average for a pro paintball team to kind of be in the...
I like that whole band analogy. That's cool. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely fair to say. I mean, it's difficult because there's not like a ton of sponsorship money involved in paintball. So like it's expensive to run a team. And so unless you've got like pretty much somebody that's really wealthy running it because they kind of love to do it, then it's pretty tough to stick around. Not to mention, it's also really difficult to win a pro event. A lot of teams that have been around in 5, 6, 7 years still have never done it. So, it's kind of an interesting allure. And it's a test, like a, kind of like a mind melt, because it's just, it's just really difficult, and it takes a lot of patience, and sometimes you just still never do it, but it's kind of everybody's just chasing that same goal.
And that's how you become a pro, is by going on the amateur circuit, winning some tournaments, and then trying to qualify for professional events? Or is there like a licensing, a sanction kind of thing you have to go through?
Yeah, like Dan was saying, it's kind of it's not really set in stone. It's just kind of they invite you up if they think you're ready, or if you kind of push and ask and you've done well in amateur, then they'll let you in. I mean, and at some point or another, sometimes the leagues have had like a relegation and a promotion system, but it does change kind of every few years, just depending on how many teams are kind of still surviving.
So you're saying it's really easy then?
Super simple.
Super simple.
Yeah.
Is your team kind of like the anomaly when it comes to length of just how long they've lasted? Has any other team been around as long as your team?
Yes, there's been, not a ton, but there's definitely been a handful. But I mean, we're talking about long time tenured and storied teams. So yeah, I mean, at the end of it, we might be one of the longest lasting teams,
That's something
outside of just a few others.
The film itself, I was going to say, was way more intense than I expected.
Yeah,
Really?
It was really good.
It was really good. I mean, it was not, I didn't know I went in completely a blank piece of paper. I was just like, I have no idea what to expect. The closest I've been is laser tag, and that was a long time ago. And
different.
it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, that's very true.
But I had no idea what I was walking into at all. So it was really good. I mean, and like I said, much more intense than I expected.
Well, we appreciate that.
Yeah, it was good.
I hope it gets, some notice on this world, because even our distributors had a similar reaction where the guy literally said something to the effect of, I just played paintball with my kid who's 14 in California a couple weeks ago, ... And I don't know, and I didn't know that this world existed. I didn't know that there was this kind of whole,
Yeah.
and And it's fascinating in the, again, as a storyteller, it's probably very frustrating for Arch and the pro players, but sometimes as a storyteller, it's interesting, but a challenge in all of these weird ebb and flow. So like if you see, the span of the film kind of covers from about, I mean, if you count the backstory in Texas, kind of like the mid 90s through now, there's probably been 4 different versions of the pro league that have dominated in like that time period. And then so depending on, so like when, League XYZ, when the MPPL, which was referenced in the movie, was running, to your point, Pat, they had a very formalized, which was interesting, relegation system where at the end of the year, the semi-pro, top 2 semi-pro teams go up, bottom 2 semi-pro teams go down. That was adapted in hybrid fashion. One of the other things that goes into it again, which makes the X Factor story a little bit unique, that has happened before, but is that typically they start to pick these kids, they start to pick them apart. Like the pro teams go down as guys cycle out, and they break up these amateur teams by going to get these established kids.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure, because then they can't survive. It's like, no, that's our anchor. You're taking our anchor.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and then especially in a spot where, and we had kind of addressed that in the film at the time. I mean, I think Archie says it, like there wasn't really a pro team out of Texas in that late 90s, right, Arch?
Yeah, no, not at all. And I think by the time we were all, as kids, we were getting good enough to play in the pro leagues. We're just far from everybody. We're young. And I think at that point, like sponsorships maybe had died down a little bit. So in order to get flown out, it had to be a pretty big budget team, but they still had like a huge pool of kids in California anyway. So it's like kind of didn't really need to go to Texas to pick people up, which ended up working out in our benefactor.
It's kind of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you say pro, how much does it cost to run the team, and how much do professional players make in a range from the bottom to the top of the pile?
Okay. Well, from the bottom is like,
Free?
a few $1,000.
Okay.
In
Free.
just like, guns, and, like sponsorship gear. And then, some guys can get paid, up to, I would say up to 45,000, maybe a little more with some bonuses.
Jeez.
But each team has 8 to 10 or 11 guys. So you could argue it costs, and entry fees, I would say on the bare minimum, it probably costs $50,000 to run a team a year. And on the high end, probably 600,000.
Because you're traveling worldwide in some cases, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, absolutely.
It surprises me. It surprises me there's not more sponsorship money, because you see these guys on ESPN, the cornhole guys, and I know they're sponsors all over the place.
Why is cornhole on?
Right? Because
I'd rather watch paintball.
100%.
The equipment is really cheap.
It's a board with a hole and some bags.
To some degree, I think it's the economics of, and there's some cool things happening in paintball right now that might do this. Like Archie referenced, it's this scale. So paintball works like other action sports, again, in the business model, meaning, okay, if you're a pro skater, it's like your money comes from sponsors. In a, like, I got a shoe sponsor, a deck sponsor, a truck sponsor, and then, okay, if appearances, and if I have a shared revenue on my deck, like yada yada, like you don't typically, maybe some of your super top guys, because they don't want to lose them, maybe get some flat retainer to stay, and like I ride Birdhouse because of this or that, versus a like, okay, like, I play for Sporting KC, I'm on a 3-year contract that pays XYZ.
Well, it's kind of like, honestly, like rodeo cowboys, to be quite honest, because they count on sponsorship or prize money. That's the only way they make it.
The difference in like rodeo and cornhole or any of those things is you're talking about 1 to 2 athletes. Like you don't
not
a team.
Right.
You scale.
Everybody's
that.
on their own.
Because it's not, because you're talking about, you got 5 in the current format. You got 5 players on the field. You got 4 subs. You need coaches, and then so that just really.
Coaches, referees.
Yeah. If you win a tournament, then do you make?
Is there
does
purse?
A team make a decent purse or prize money?
To be honest, no, it's not. Like nobody really plays for the money. Because there's just not much in it. The sponsorships aren't, the sponsorships when I was a kid were huge, but since then are not even close to what they used to be. But at the same time, like the experiences we've all had are invaluable. And I think largely that's why we do it. Now that being said, there are ways to make money playing paintball, and if you're creative, you can definitely make it work. But you've got to, it takes time, and you definitely got to be kind of pretty sharp, and figure out ways to kind of position yourself and align with products or people that are kind of helping you out too.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of funny with making again the band analogy at the time, although I guess Napster was sort of killing it by then, but like they do win. I mean, you do see them, win money in the 2000s, in the time that the film addresses when the team was getting started and the sport was sort of rocket shipping. You had significant winnings. That has come down, and I make the band analogy where album sales used to be the revenue stream for bands. Obviously, they no longer are. Honestly, neither are streams if you look at what Spotify pays. But it's creating this platform where they can maybe do other things, and I mean that's probably where you see some of these, it fall for some of these guys. And so again, what's interesting as a storyteller of it's like, hey, here's a bunch of people who are incredibly passionate, artistic in a certain way, and dedicated to this thing that isn't necessarily offering a large financial payday.
I mean, it's truly just love of the sport, just the competition of it.
interesting.
What did you think of the film itself, Archie?
I mean, honestly, I thought it was great. It's interesting because you don't realize how big of, what it's going to be throughout the whole time. And then you watch it and you realize this is something that you're going to be able to show people for the rest of your life.
That's cool.
Which was kind of one of those things, like at the end of the day, like that's not why I ever started playing paintball or got involved the way in which I did. But now it's like, man, I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very awesome. And some of the shots in the movie, Dan, you shot it? Did you shoot it all? Most of it?
No, I didn't shoot. I mean,
like when they're like during matches, like you were right. Whoever was shooting was right in there.
I was one of, and certainly the worst of any of our camera operators. But no, there's a number of.
Bill just fell off his chair.
Right. And you have a meeting with Bill after this.
No, man, I make I make no claims to airs.
You can direct it though.
And edit it and write it, and I shoot.
Right?
I have no qualms about what I'm really, really good at, and what I'm okay at. And other guys in our crew are,
the
awesome
shots are great.
cinematographers. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I said, that's a lot of me eating it all day long because you got to remember, I can't shoot these guys back. I got a camera in my hand, not a paintball gun.
Right. Do you have like protective gear on in case of
your neck helmet?
You wear a little bit.
A neck helmet.
Sometimes if I can, we wear helmets. We wear helmets in other places too.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds awesome.
The film itself, though, it's out there if you want to watch it. And iTunes.
Yeah, iTunes and Amazon Prime right now.
And we'll have links to both in our show notes too. So just click down below and you guys can check it out.
And any social media links as well.
They're all there.
If somebody wants to tag along or
you can follow the film. You can follow and I'm sure you guys will throw it up there too. You can follow Archie and the team. It's on Amazon Prime, iTunes. We had a really good debut, which is pretty cool. I think right now we're sitting at we're the number 3 sports documentary on iTunes.
Awesome. Wow, that's great.
So that's pretty cool.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, dude, you got to give. It's cool that you noticed that, Pat. I mean, you got to give a lot of guys to, and not just me. There's a lot of people that are paintball, doing camera work, stills and video, and it's a long day. Those guys wear it. Like I said, we have some great cinematographers, James Cremosta, Sammy Anzari, who's worked with Dave Grohl on Sound City, Brad Mon, some of this team that's worked on all of our picks. we licensed some footage for some places too, because you're talking about footage. There's like 14 years of it in there.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
Man.
Do you have any games coming up? Any competitions?
Yeah, so they're just starting to get going again. I've played 2 tournaments in the last month, but they were kind of like exhibition, not like a full-on pro tournament
Right.
like what we're used to. But we have World Cup coming up in the middle of November. So
Do you get
in a
any
couple weeks here,
coverage?
we're say that
Do
again.
you get any coverage? Like people can watch?
So I'm not 100% sure on that because of the COVID stuff, but normally at all the events, there's, stands that, span the entire length of the pro field. And then they also do kind of a live webcast show as well, which I'm certain that's going to be happening. I just don't know what the rules are about spectators and whatnot at this particular event. But nonetheless, I'm excited to kind of get back into it. And it's always, those are stressful weekends, but they're fun and exciting and they push me, nonetheless. So I look forward to it.
You would think that channels would be clamoring
You
for
would think-
anything live.
You would think,
Right.
even without
Networks.
COVID around, you would think that they would have
You would
this
think-
up there.
Well, I think about when the extreme sports was, they were focused. There were so many different networks focused on quote extreme sports. Never saw it.
Has it ever been, or will it ever be part of the X Games?
I don't think it'd ever be part of the X Games. It's had a number of shows over the years in those flirts on ESPNs and Fox Sports. The thing is I'm obviously biased. Archie's maybe a tiny bit because he's in it, but like, I fully believe what you guys saw, and maybe we're seeing some prove out in that, is the format to which you consume the sport. If you guys were to watch it live, even like a live cast, and there's a wonderful team that does that on an over-the-top network called Go Sports, but as new people, you would be like, what am I watching? Because if you think about it, there's not, and this has always been, as a storyteller and a filmmaker, the issue with the sport, there's not a center focus. There's not and so
It's like a battlefield.
It's very difficult to watch live and kind of put together unless you're like, a fan of that. And so that's what I think has
Or
been.
maybe even a former player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like to know where to go and
Know
where
where
to
to
look.
That's
Yeah.
where I think the why it hasn't had super success at being televised live is like televised. Somebody hasn't decided like a format that's accessible to a wider
They haven't
audience.
figured out how to view it or how
Yeah.
to how to
or how
show
to
to get it,
produce
yeah.
it
Yeah.
in a way that
Yeah.
Or there's not a format that, lends itself to that either, because obviously we play whatever the format of the time is, and that
Right.
changes every handful of years. Just for a long time, they haven't figured out a way to make it easily consumable for your average non-paintball player.
Yeah. And that's the thing with the X Games is that if you, and it was very contentious in the beginning, but if you talk to practitioners of that sport, skaters, skateboarding especially in the early days of X Game, they're like, this isn't skateboarding. This isn't, but like they've come to sort of live with the fact that, and the organizers got it more true as they introduced some of the street stuff, or, it's weird. Like, X Games started selling vert to the public at a time when the skateboard world was like, you couldn't get arrested for vert skating. Like street style had become, but over 20 years, it kind of got to be this understanding of like, okay, this is this format that's kind of for accessibility, and its credibility has kind of increased, but it has this role. I think mostly what paintball's tried to do is take what is actually the sport, the pro sport as it is now, and just elevate that and just show that to folks, and it hasn't translated. But there's some interesting things going on based out of COVID. We referenced where Archie was talking about the network that promotes the webcasts, the World Cup and whatnot, where they've started to see some sort of crafted 2-on-2s and things like that are a little bit more maybe accessible to the viewer. So, they say necessity is the mother of invention. So maybe
A lot of companies have found that. A lot of businesses have found that out, right? They've had to change their business model.
Yeah.
But for now, the film works.
Right. Yeah.
The film is a great
Yeah.
way to be introduced to it.
Yeah.
More documentaries, more
Documentaries. That's what we need.
Archie, I don't know any of your relationship status at all, but are there groupies? Are there like, I mean, you have like those ladies like, there's Becky again. She
God.
follows us from tourney to tourney.
Yeah.
I mean, there definitely are. I wouldn't say it's like being in a famous rock band, but yeah. But I mean, at the same time, like the way in which we are doing this, it's like that's just so low on the totem pole.
Do any women play at all?
Yeah, absolutely, and honestly, in a very similar way. I mean, most people that play paintball love it. So.
Yeah.
It's just maybe not as many women think about playing paintball and think they'd have as much
I
fun
don't think
or
as
that
many-
much fun doing it.
Probably as many little girls get introduced to it,
Exactly.
at
So,
that young age.
Well, because boys, before I ever played paintball, growing up, 12 to whatever, boys are stupid. And my brother and I and all my friends, we would get
still that
together
way, Pat.
and we would. Well,
It's still-
I didn't put a period or put were. Boys are stupid. But we would go out and again, don't recommend doing this at all. But we would shoot each other with BB guns. Like we would hide and we'd get on teams and we would like use the whole like acre of my parents' woods and we'd have football helmets on, which were not effective and kept protecting your eyes. But and girls are smarter than that. They don't do that stuff. So they don't have it as a little kid wanting to shoot each other, and boys do.
Yeah, that's a good point. But that being said, I've taken several girlfriends and friends out there, and they always have a blast. And it is one of those sports where unless you kind of have a weird, bad experience, I would say 95% of the people really enjoy it.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, if you get a chance to watch the film. Just start there because it's real. You can watch it in your own home, sitting on your own couch, and it's like an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's standard, pretty standard documentary length, and it really falls in that sport. I think what we really tried to do, and I think this has come out, is it's just a great sports story. If you're a fan of sports documentaries, and you don't have to have like a super high paintball IQ to understand what's going on.
Blank piece of
Right.
paper.
Right,
Walking
all of
in,
us,
I
really.
had not a clue and really
we
enjoyed
all
it.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, and it's called Best Kids in Texas, which I think is a great name. Except when I try to say it, I always want to say Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. like 10 times this morning, I have Best Kids in Texas.
Autocorrect.
Right, it's just I know Texas is coming big, and usually it's whorehouse in the middle.
What's the best
that's
what?
great.
Okay. Archie, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on. My pleasure.
Thanks, buddy. And Dan, thank
Awesome,
you for
Dan.
coming in too.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
You betcha.
So click the links in the show notes, and that's where you can go see Best Kids in Texas.
Nice save.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to our podcast. It's Pat and JT.
Oh, yeah.
Pat and JT Podcast, a Hurrdat Media Production.